Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our keynote series as part of CUTRIC's second annual Low Carbon Smart Mobility Technology Conference. I'm delighted to introduce with me here today Parliamentary Secretary for TransLink and Member of Legislative Assembly in British Columbia, Bowinn Ma. MLA Ma has represented the constituency of North Vancouver-Lonsdale since 2017. Critically and interestingly to our audience, she is a professional engineer with a background in transportation engineering, and specifically she works on active files around housing, transportation, childcare, and climate action, critical issues that we know are all interlinked. Interesting also for our audience, Ms. Ma, is the fact that you're leading an integration effort around transportation between the North Shore and throughout the Lower Mainland. And as I understand it, in 2018, you led the Integrated North Shore Transportation Planning Project, which, for those of you less familiar with that initiative, established a transportation action plan for the North Shore and continues to drive intergovernmental improvements for the region, including the first ever feasibility study into rapid transit across the Burrard Inlet, which is really exciting. At this conference, we've been talking about rapid transit and the electrification of it, so we're excited to hear about those initiatives. MLA Ma, we've had the opportunity, you and I, to meet a couple times in the past, once at TransLink's electric bus launch, which was exciting for us, and once at your Victoria office as well, discussing always the advancement of low carbon smart mobility through technologies in British Columbia. We now have an office in Vancouver, so we're very happy and excited to be working with our members in the transit and innovative community in your jurisdiction. And we look forward to years of working with you and your government on the low carbon smart mobility file. So now I'm going to pass you the virtual microphone because we'd all love to hear what the British Columbia government is doing to advance mobility for all Canadians, in particular in the post-pandemic world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. And it's typical that we would start each of our speeches or each of these sessions with an acknowledgement of the traditional territories that we are on. And I'm coming to you from the traditional territory of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh. And I'd like to honor the fact that I am here by speaking a few of their words in the language of the Squamish people. So, hot squal tanoya, hot than squalowin, quins quachnomia, nail talto meok, ya Musqueam, yes Skohomish, es Tsleil-Waututh, Bowinn Ma, Quinsna, Chenkumuntomia. And what I've simply said is that, hello, I'm very happy to be with all of you here today, and I'm on the territory of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh. And my name is Bowinn Ma, and thank you so much for your attention. So as you heard earlier, I am coming to you as the Parliamentary Secretary for TransLink, and I want to really make sure that, or begin my remarks by acknowledging how difficult the last several months have been for people across the country and across the world as well. We have been extremely fortunate here in British Columbia. We have so far been able to flatten the curve. We've been able to keep transmission rates low, and we are now actively restarting our economy and social activities. However, not every jurisdiction has been as fortunate. With people from all over joining this conference digitally, I think it's important that we remember that some of our peers and fellow conference attendees and their communities continue to face down COVID-19 in a very real way every single day. And it is with this context in mind that I also have to recognize that my remarks today, written from the perspective of British Columbia, come from a place of great privilege. As British Columbia now actively restarts its economy and social activities with confidence in our low transmission rates and capable public health system, this will not be the case for every jurisdiction represented in this conference. And this also means that the contemporary context within which we hold these discussions today are very, very relevant. If I had given this speech to you in January, it would have undoubtedly been filled with the unwavering confidence in regional modeling that only organizations not facing down an unknown future in the middle of a pandemic could offer. But things are different now. And the reality is that when it comes to things like population growth, particularly localized or regional population growth, transportation modeling, travel patterns, or trip counts, we don't know how much, if any, of the data or projections that we've painstakingly built over time will still apply right now. And we know that transit ridership is down here in British Columbia and all over the world. And while we are seeing promising returns of ridership in Metro Vancouver, many other places are unsure of whether their ridership numbers will ever recover. Working from home and video conferencing meetings have become a mainstay in our households, seemingly overnight, and telecommuting is here to stay. But to what extent it will permanently replace physical commutes is still hard to say. But there are some things we know will likely not change. We know that people will continue to want safe, integrated, efficient, and affordable ways to get where they need to or want to go, which means that we must continue to strive for forward-thinking transportation systems and networks that meet the needs of those people. Space in urban settings will continue to be limited, which means that endless expansion of lanes on roads and highways still won't be the right way forward for urban mobility and the building of complete communities where people are able to live, work, play, study, and shop without a lot of travel. All of that will still be important. When the pandemic is over, there is little doubt that climate change will still be an issue that we must all pull together in order to resolve for the sake of our children's futures, which means that we must continue to reach for low carbon footprints in whatever transportation systems we enable. And as we've learned through the pandemic, the most essential work of our society, sadly, will likely still be done by some of the least paid workers in our communities. Cleaners, care aides, grocery store workers, early childhood educators. These are people who can't afford to live close to where they work and will therefore have to travel further per dollar earned on a day-to-day basis than those who occupy well-paying professional jobs. And that means that even as we go forward through and out of the pandemic, our transportation systems will still need to be designed with an awareness of the inequality that exists within our communities and an intention to enable greater socioeconomic justice. And all of this means that the commitments of our government made prior to COVID-19 to invest in public transit, to invest in affordable housing, to working with local governments in order to create livable communities, to increase active transportation and enable micromobility will continue to be incredibly important as we move forward through and out of this pandemic. So Move, Commute, Connect, that's the brand name for our government's active transportation strategy. And it will continue to be our government strategy to double the number of trips taken by active transportation within 10 years. And it will continue to be part of Clean BC, which will continue to be our climate action strategy. That climate action strategy commits us to reducing our overall GHG emissions in our province by 40% by 2030, 60% by 2040, and 80% by 2050. Our government's continued commitment to prioritize public transit funding will still be critical. A $7.3 billion capital investment means more buses, more bus rapid transit, more C-bus service, and new rail rapid transit lines, representing the largest investment in transit in BC's history. And the knowledge that all of this work is still only the start of what needs to be done moving forward means that our commitment to working with TransLink and the Regional Mayor's Council to develop the next regional transportation strategy, which is called Transport 2050, must and still remain strong, because no matter what happens after COVID-19, the BC government and TransLink must continue to have a shared vision for transit and transportation advancement in Metro Vancouver over the next 30 years. But there's more ahead for us than the plans that we've had in place before we arrived to where we are today. COVID-19 has changed the way that people live and created opportunities for us to enable those changes towards a better path forward. I'm reminded of a 2019 study titled "The Social Cost of Automobility, Cycling, and Walking in the European Union." And that study calculated that for every kilometer driven by a car incurred an external cost of about 17 Canadian cents per kilometer, whereas cycling and walking brought benefits of about 28 and 58 Canadian cents per kilometer. And while there are still transportation routes where we have few options other than to invest in highways, particularly in our rural areas, there are absolutely opportunities, particularly in more populated areas, to choose how we encourage travel behavior to rebound after the pandemic. And it seems like many people have already picked up on these opportunities, perhaps bolstered by the repeated recommendations of Dr. Bonnie Henry, who's our provincial health officer. She has been encouraging people to engage in more outdoor activities like cycling as a safe physical activity to take on during a time when we're otherwise encouraged to stay home. So people are walking, cycling, and rolling more. And you can see cities around the world responding by installing pop-up bike and walking lanes, and in some cases blocking off car traffic entirely. In Vancouver, the city of Vancouver will designate up to 50 kilometers of slow streets which encourage safer walking and cycling during COVID-19. People will be allowed to walk on the roads while vehicles will be expected to reduce their speeds. In North Vancouver, where I live, the City Council recently voted for and implemented an open streets plan that rapidly reallocated road space for use by people, doing in a couple of weeks what would probably have normally been held up by years of hand-wringing and public debate over the value of parking spots prior to COVID-19. All over the world, we are seeing space being reclaimed from hunks of metal for people. But the question of whether we will hold on to these learnings long-term remains to be seen. Now, as mentioned earlier, transit ridership numbers are still a long way from pre-COVID levels, but they are going up, and our government intends to continue to support transit in BC through this difficult time. So we're working closely with TransLink and BC Transit to ensure that they can continue to provide essential services so that people don't end up turning back to their cars to fill the void. Because we know how important a strong transit service will be to our success on multiple levels as we begin to restore the economy through BC's Restart Plan. The world is different now, and we don't know what lies ahead, but the need for continued focus on cleaner, healthier transportation choices that enable livable and sustainable communities remains. Which brings me to all of this and your role in all of this, because your role is critical. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that humans can pull together to do incredible things when we're willing to put the needs of our communities and loved ones ahead of our desire for the illusion of personal convenience and profit. But that level of organizing, that level of sacrifice doesn't just happen on its own. The work of showing the public and policymakers and other leaders about what could be cannot be left to chance. It takes a concerted effort by people with vision who are willing to educate and push for what needs to be done. In short, it takes people like you. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank the organizers for charging forward on this conference in a new and exciting way. And I want to express my deepest gratitude for each and every day that all of you spend in the work of bringing us to a better future and a better world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bowinn Ma. And I have to say, your words are inspirational. And for those of us who have followed your career politically, it's very clear that you live your message. You captured it as move, commute, connect in a climate-aware and active British Columbia. There is no doubt that as Canadians, we recognize the province has been a leader in climate action, establishing economic growth in a carbon price landscape with mobility at the forefront. So we'll move to just one of the questions that have emanated from our membership group. Looking at the long-term changes you alluded to, slow streets, reallocated streets. I know when I go running in Stanley Park, it's a breath of fresh air. When I go running in downtown Toronto, I'm pretty sure I'm burning my lungs off. There's not a breath of fresh air. And so it really leads to this desire to have a redesigned urban landscape. And maybe COVID-19 and the pandemic has motivated us to see what the art of the possible is. It's a long way to get ridership back and active mobility, but nonetheless, there is this potentiality. And from some of our members like Proterra, which manufactures electric buses not too far away from you in California, one of the questions is, what does this new normal look like for public transit in the context of COVID-19? Are we looking at a return or a walk away from electric mobility? And then also potentially, what are some of the things that the province is doing, recognizing the role of essential services and how we might mobilize transit to accommodate another pandemic in the future?
So building smart, connected communities that help people navigate the region effectively where they live, work, play, learn is and will continue to be a key priority for our government. But the truth is that we really don't know what the new normal will look like in 6 months or even 3 months from now. What we do know is that the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting every aspect of our lives and every sector across BC, including transit. Since the start of this pandemic, we have had to adapt to a different way of living and working, including how we move around our cities and towns. It's a really good question as to what the new normal will be like, because you would think that we would really need to know in order to actually plan ahead for that new normal. But it is true, transit ridership here has dropped like a stone. And there is definitely a concern that we will revert back to the car-centric transportation systems that we've been working so hard to try to evolve away from. But we've also seen how cities can fill the void that was left by rapid declines in public transit usage during the first couple of months of COVID-19 with more active transportation. So I mentioned that in my remarks earlier. We've seen cities opening up car-free roads to encourage biking and cycling, walking, rolling. And I feel like I've never seen more casual bike riding in the communities around me than there have been during COVID-19. We see road space that's being repurposed for people rather than parking as communities work to expand patios and other services out into the roadways that were previously reserved only for large steel cages on 4 wheels. And since BC's restart, ridership on transit in Metro Vancouver is making a comeback. Now, are we back to the levels we were at before COVID-19? No, but ridership has increased by 85% in comparison to the low point we hit in April. And if we can keep this up, we may well be on our way to a full recovery. BC is also very fortunate to be a place where we have access to abundant, clean hydroelectricity, which is important as we continue to do our work to tackle that other major worldwide crisis I mentioned, which is climate change. And as terrible as COVID-19 has been for our economy and our businesses and several of our industries, there is an opportunity that we cannot fail to take advantage of as we work to rebuild and restart here in BC. And that opportunity is to rebuild our economy with a deliberate and concerted emphasis on more sustainability, more environmentally, socially responsible industries, and more environmentally, socially responsible practices, and environmentally and socially responsible personal behaviors. And transportation is one of the most important sectors for us when it comes to reducing GHG emissions and doing our part to tackle climate change. So as economic activity grows, the number of trips that will occur will also grow. And how those trips are taken will matter a lot. Will people go back into their buses? And if not, will they get back into their cars? Or will we be able to enable the continued embrace of active transportation that we've seen during COVID-19? A lot of this will depend on where we invest money as a government, but also as a society. So where we invest money as we move towards recovery. With induced demand being a very real phenomenon in all modes of transportation, what infrastructure we choose to fund will in effect become a self-fulfilling prophecy for how the behavior of travel habits is shaped. So the bottom line is, it's too soon to tell, but we have important opportunities right now for us to be actively working to shape that new normal rather than let it carry us like a leaf in a storm.
You know, MLA Ma, everything you say is really music to our ears, because at the end of the day, what is political power other than the ability to distribute resources? And it's exciting to know that there is now political leadership like your own and that people like you are in control of distributing those resources as we look to make a society that's more just, more mobile, more economically equivalent, and less racialized. So heading into this 21st century, a lot of unknowns, transit coming back and roaring back, we hope so, with the kind of leadership in British Columbia that positions it at the forefront as a solution in climate action. I have to say, you know, at CUTRIC, we believe transit is the future of economic growth. There's no way around it. And even if there is another pandemic, we have to figure it out because lots of people don't have cars, including myself. And so that's the kind of society we want to build. Thank you so much, MLA Ma. Your insights have been extremely helpful to us, inspirational, and your hard work with the British Columbian government is helping to make mobility better for all Canadians as we forge ahead to make the world a better place. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I lift my hands to each and every one of you.
Thank you.